In this video, we're going to continue on with our training simulator by adding some increasingly difficult behaviors as you are experiencing the scene. So what I mean is, as the scene goes along and as you drop balls or game spheres into the buckets, the table will start to increase in the tilt to increase the difficulty of the scene. And so what we're going to do is create a state machine that adds that tilt, that rotates the table, but it also is going to be using some counting behaviors. Now, it's important to note that this is actually a re-recording of a video that we have previously recorded a while back, and this is going to be using some new behaviors and some new actions. So you may have seen another video that used some other actions. If this is your first time, go ahead and watch this video. If you've seen this before and it seems a little bit different, it's because it is an updated way of doing and creating this particular behavior. All right, so let's get started with this counting behavior. All right, I'm here in my scene, and I'm going to be adding this behavior to the table offset. And you might notice that I do have several different behaviors down here in my assets panel, one called tilt behavior complete and tilt behavior old. This is the one we created in the old video. This is the behavior we're going to be creating here in this video. But we are going to walk all the way through it. So the table offset, this is the entity we're going to be adding on the behavior to. Now, the reason why, let me quickly explain why this is important. We are adding it onto the tilt behavior, or the table offset. If I expand that entity, you'll notice that there is a child entity called table. So if I select that, you'll see that the axis, or the center origin of the table, is in the middle of the table. And the reason why we created this whole table offset to begin with is that, thinking about this behavior, if we start rotating the table and it's rotating around the center, as it rotates, you'll see how the edge of the table will gradually get lower and lower and lower and further away from the user, and it will eventually start moving its way into that kind of that pillar that's right there. Whereas, I'll reset that. Whereas if we use the table offset's axis is at the edge, so that when we rotate it, oh, come on, let me grab you. There it is. As we rotate it, you see how the edge stays in place. So the user doesn't have to get used to the ball going into a different position in front of them. It really will always end up in the same spot, regardless of how fast it's coming at them. All right, so I will set that back to where it was. And with that, let's get started. I will add now the behavior component, the state machine component, to the table offset. So I click add component, I go to state machine, and under state machine I'm going to press the plus button, and I'm going to call this one tilt behavior 2. All right, oops, go back, tilt behavior 2. All right, for the first state I'm going to get rid of that so I have some more space. Our first state we're going to call init /reset. So this is going to initialize the location of our, not the location, I'm sorry. This is going to initialize our counting behavior, or an attribute that is going to be counting. We'll get to that in a second, as well as resetting when it needs to reset. This will all become more clear as we move along. So just follow along and we will learn really how this all works together shortly. I'm going to click add action, and the type of actions we're going to be looking for is attribute. So we haven't really done this before, but if you look over here on the left-hand column, you'll see a bunch of different categories. We're going to click attribute. And I was searching for something, so I'll get rid of that. All right. And what we're going to be looking for is the set numeric attribute. Set numeric attribute. Then over here in the inspector panel, we're going to call this one, set the name of the numeric attribute. We're going to call it correct drops. You can call this whatever you want, but we do have to stay consistent. We do want the value also to stay at 0. So we'll go ahead and leave that. Notice how there's no transition. So we do need to add a transition action. We'll search for transition and find it here. So now we can transition to other states. We'll add another state. This one we're going to call adding. And we'll click add action again. Search for, or just click, filter down to just the attribute actions. And then we're going to compare attribute math with a constant. That's what I wanted. attribute math with a constant. And the attribute is going to be correct drops. The operator is going to be add. Notice you can add, subtract, multiply, divide. We'll just keep it at add. And the constant we want to be 1. So really what it is doing is that when the scene starts, correct drops is going to start at the value of 1, and every time that this behavior passes through this state, it's going to add 1 value to the correct drop attribute. Notice how there's no transition, so we need to add another transition. All right. And we do need to add another state. Actually, I skipped one. So I still need to go add state. We'll click state 1, and this one actually needs to be listening. Jumped ahead just for a second. We'll click add action and then add the listen action. We actually need 2 listen actions, so I'll add another one. Now, what we're going to be listening for, if I go over here and I filter down just to my behaviors, I'll just click the bucket, the blue trigger. If you remember, every time the ball enters this bucket, it's going to just simply emit a message that is into bucket blue. The orange one is going to do something similar, but it's going to be into bucket orange. I'm just going to copy the into bucket blue channel message and go back to my tilt behavior and insert that as the message that's being listened to. Meaning every time a ball is dropped into a bucket, it's either going to emit the into bucket blue or into bucket. I just am adding it to both channels, but just changing the second one to orange. So we have an into bucket blue and then into bucket orange. All right. Then it's going to be add. Every time it hears it, it will then add a value. Get rid of that again. We're going to add state. And we're going to call this one counter. And I didn't mean to search for that. I just want to go to attribute again. And go down to just attributes. We're going to select the compare numeric attribute to a constant. Again, the attribute is going to be correct drops. And the constant that we are comparing it to, you can do whatever you want here. I'm going to do 3. So that you'll see, and we'll see how this works momentarily. We're going to add one more state, and this one's going to be called tween rotate. So this is going to be the action that actually rotates that entire table. We'll click add action and search for tween rotate. So we're going to rotate it around the z-axis, just 2 degrees. We do want to keep it relative, but we don't want it to take very long. So we're just going to say 0.7 seconds. And easing type direction we can leave as it is. So you see, tween rotate is just rotating 2 degrees relative. Relative is important because we want it to add on 2 degrees to its current position. We don't want to just immediately change it to a rotation of 2. We want to always be adding it on. So that's why we need to have relative selected. All right, so we have everything set up now. We just have to wire it up with transitions. So our init reset is going to go to listen. So it's going to initialize this counter, really, or this attribute that is keeping track of the correct drops. Every time it hears into bucket blue or into bucket orange event, it's going to go to the adding state. The state is going to look at the correct. Let me make sure I have this. Okay, correct drops and adding correct drops. So we do need to make sure this is consistent. Okay, it is. So after it hears those messages, it'll then transition to adding. It'll look at the attribute correct drops. With the operator of add, it will add 1. And then it'll go to the counter. And so it'll look at it and say, all right, is it Correct drops. Has it reached 3? Is it less than 3? Is it equal to 3? Or is it greater than 3? If it is less than 3, it'll just go back to listen. If it is equal to, then if it comes back to it, of course, it'll go through it several times. And then when it sees that, oh, it is equal to 3, it'll go to rotate. And once it rotates, we're going to go back to init/reset. So this is resetting the whole attribute. So it's really counting to 3 and then resetting back to 0. All right. So it goes from init reset to listen. It's listening for both of those messages, into bucket blue and into bucket orange. It then goes to adding, where it's using the attribute math with a constant, and it's looking at the correct drops. And then it goes to counter, and the constant is 3, so that if it is less than 3, see how I'm dragging from the less than 3. If it's less than 3, it'll go back to listen. And then once it is equal to 3, it will then go to rotate. And then once it rotates, it'll go back to init/reset. All right, so let's just see how this works. So you got 1, there's 2 drops, and here on the third, we'll go through that counter behavior. You see how it rotated slightly there? So I have 1, 2, and 3. So then it rotates a little bit more. So as you continue along, the balls do start rolling faster because the tilt has gone up, and it gradually becomes more difficult. In the next video, we're going to be looking at how to create HTML to create a counter to display the correct drops and the correct score of the user. You may have seen it actually here in this video. I have this little counter up here. We have not gotten to that yet in the video series because, of course, like I've said a few times, this is a redo of a video that was created a while ago. So things, again, look a little bit out of order. But to give a little bit of a preview, this is what we're going to be creating. So you saw as every time I got a correct drop, it counted a score. Really a scoreboard is really what we're going to be creating using HTML. So I hope you join us for the next video, and thanks for watching.